Thank you all for coming to our first Master Online Teacher event. And we have 3 of our 4 Master Online Teachers who were designated this year for our panel today. And so we very much appreciate your coming and interacting with this group. I think you'll find that they have a great deal of expertise in online education and education in general, and so I hope that it will be a good use of your time and that you will go away thinking this is a good idea. This is one of the good things that we need to be doing on campus to talk about how to improve the quality of online instruction, and that was our major goal for last year. That was our major goal for these designations. We wanted to do something that we thought could really impact the quality of online education at ETSU. So we are keeping that in the forefront, and I think that we have very good ambassadors for quality education. And I'll let you guys introduce yourselves because I'm sure you have things you want to say about yourself. But I wanted to say thank you, welcome, help yourself to refreshments, and we hope you enjoy it. Thank you.
I'm Alison Barton, and I'm a faculty member over in the College of Education and primarily teach online. Yeah, I'll stop there.
I'm Susan Epps. I'm faculty in Allied Health Sciences. I went into online basically being thrown in. My chair said, here, all new classes for you and all online. Good luck. Currently, I teach both online and face-to-face, and I guess that's it.
I'm Nancy Cameron. I'm from the College of Nursing, and I've been teaching online since 2005 probably. And before that, I got experience on the other side of the coin, and I was a student online. So I have some sympathy for some of what our students go through. And I feel like I have done online so long. I've got a face-to-face presentation coming up in a couple of months, and it's like, I don't know how to do this. So bear with me here. And I think it's
yes.
This is just general chat time.
It is.
And any
we have
questions
nothing prepared.
That you have? Yeah.
It's
we
questions.
We don't have a presentation.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, I'll give you a bit. I'm more famous for my questions, so I will ask you questions.
You ask great questions, Les.
Since we're about to embark on a new online course, which might have more. We already teach an online BGSD 1800 basic library research skills online course, which is very sad, and we developed another health science section with Susan actually. And those are more sort of settled into the basic mechanics of it. Okay, so now we're looking at another course that would really be a lot more, have a lot more thinking kinds of things and not your basics. So we see the one we've developed already is your basic. This is going to help you get your paper done for your courses, and you should take this and learn all this stuff because it would really help you with your grades. 2, oh, this is going to be a new way of thinking about information literacy. So a lot more not so concrete. And so I'm wondering if you guys sort of, how do you bridge that online where, in a classroom you could sort of have that discussion about less concrete. And in my head, I'm always thinking concrete, online has to be concrete because we don't have a community of people talking to each other in the classroom. So.
Yes, you do.
Well,
absolutely.
Yeah, the discussion board is a great place for that. And I know that a lot of people were like, oh, no, discussions. But I found that in the classes I teach, I have to be present in the discussion boards. I can't just let the students do it all. I try to let them lead as much as possible. I teach senior level students, so we're grad students. So there's a little bit of a difference if you're talking about, freshmen and sophomores, but they can still, they can do that too. But a lot of it has to do with your presence in the discussion board and making sure that you're following up. If they're leaving things very basic, asking the next question. Well, tell me a little more about that. Dig in a little deeper, or asking follow-up questions that make them think about what they said. Because I noticed initially a lot of my students will just have a very basic response, and then it takes that follow-up, and now they start doing it, because I've modeled what I want them to do. I can't say they all do, but a lot of them will follow up with the question, oh, I like what you said there, but what about this situation, or how about this? So the more you model that, probably eventually you can back off a little bit, because others will pick up on that and go, oh, that's what I'm supposed to be doing. But that also has to do with your instructions and what you tell them you expect in the discussion boards. If it's about counting posts, you're not going to get that level of response. So telling them what you expect in a discussion post, it's not just the number that they do, because then you're going to get a lot of great posts like that. But if all you're doing is counting, that counts as a post if you don't tell them what the expectation is. And I think Allison does a really good job with telling her students, this is what, and you may do too, I just don't know what I can do. And telling your students.
Describing what a good quality post looks like or has to have in it. But, I mean, that means as an instructor, you need to be in there and reading and evaluating the quality of the posts. But it elevates the conversation almost invariably.
That's the thing, yeah. I always feel
It's
like
time, but it's worth it.
Yeah.
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 Yeah,
You
it's,
don't really want that this term, you want them more.
The other way you can do things, I think community learning is really good in discussions, but you could also be doing some guided inquiry, like some structured guided questions that take them from the concrete and help through questioning to bridge that gap. And there are a number of places online you can do that. You could do that just as a document that's sort of like I hate to use the word worksheet, but sort of like a worksheet they work through, or you could do it, I've done guided inquiry in assessments, make it untimed, but you can actually pick images in there and walk them through and give them essay question type questions, so they have space to answer whatever they need to answer. And just by the way you scaffold those questions, you can get them from concrete to something a little bit deeper. It sounds like you're trying to get more critical thinking out of them this time around.
And I just, no. Of course, Amy and I are doing it together, so Amy knows how. But I need lots more help about how, to get from there to there. Yeah, exactly.
And in nursing, we use case studies a lot. And I'm sure you have some of those opportunities also. And so I like to use discussion boards. I love to use discussion boards for things like ethical questions, because there is no right answer. And I think that, for me, the key to discussion boards is not just posing a question where there is a right answer, but giving them something they really have to think through. And it may be that ethical, or if you look at it this way and you look at it that way, you can come up with two different answers. Or it may be that case study where, again, there may not be just one way to do it. And part of those instructions that we were talking about is always that, no, I agree type statements are not acceptable, period. They don't count. I mean, it's nice to say, I agree with you, and way to go, you did a good job. But you got to do more than that, and you have to explore that. And I encourage them to ask each other questions to go that next level. And I just flat out say it, go the next level.
And
go a
typically,
little bit deeper into
my
it.
expectations are that you're citing your sources. I mean, you're referencing course material and citing sources as you support your answers in discussion boards.
You think you have to say, sort of like, because these are mostly freshmen and sophomores, you think you have to say there is no right answer? We are trying to get you to the next level.
if there isn't, I mean, if there
Right.
truly isn't
Yeah.
a right answer,
Right.
but if there, and I think that goes back to combining all of this. The question you ask, when I inherited the classes that I teach now, I got very frustrated by the responses, and I know Allison and I've had this conversation. Everybody answers the same way, because the first person who gets the right answer, everybody just copies that one. But I went back and looked at the questions in the discussion boards. Again, I inherited it, and I didn't have time that first semester to really go through a major overhaul. But by the midway through the semester, I'm like, every week it's the same responses to everything. And I went back and looked at the questions, and they were very short answer type response questions. and they were kind of set answers. So I spent a lot of time looking at the questions and going, okay, instead of getting a yes or no or just a very short answer response, how can I reword this to get at the same, more thinking, but worded in such a way that it's not going to necessarily elicit the same response from everybody. But you can also, yeah.
That gave me an
I
idea.
know where you're going.
The other thing is, and what I've learned just recently as a pretty good trick, because even when you do have good open-ended questions, often students read the first response and can't think past that person's ideas. So now, counter to what my students would prefer, they have to post before they can read the other posts.
Yeah.
There's a way to set that up on D2L,
Yeah.
so that they
Awesome.
have to do
It's
some
awesome.
independent thinking before they start to see what other feedback is, which is really, I have them evaluating lesson plans right now. My grad students, they really hate this feature, by the way. They have let me know they hate this feature, but it's so funny because I grab lesson plans off of the internet and post them, and then they just evaluate them according to what we're learning about in class. And somebody will post, like 5 people will have posted, this is a terrible lesson plan, and one poster, I loved this lesson plan, and then they're like, oh, I see what you're saying. So it kind of lets them be an independent evaluator before they start group thinking.
Yeah.
You know.
Can we have that function?
Yeah.
Yes.
You want to see it?
Yes.
We don't use the discussion.
Yeah.
That is a
I'll
great
I
idea.
can show you how to
Pull
do
that
that.
That would be, that
Yeah.
consisting.
Another tool that I use sometimes, and it can be fun, is the early bird gets the worm. And I tell them, this is what this discussion is about. And if you're an early bird, if you post first, then you maybe get to give the immediate, quick, easy answer, because then the next person, nobody can use the same answer. And so the next person may have to work a little harder to come up with that answer, and the poor person who waits until the last second to post, they've got a lot of work to do in front of them. But it usually only takes one of those discussion boards before they're all in there pretty early. But it can be fun. It can shake it up a little bit. Or have a debate. You can do in groups, and you can have a debate, or you can have each individual participate to the pro and the con of it. And those sometimes are fun techniques that kind of break it up from the, here's the question, give me the answer. What else?
Are we doing this for the first time?
Yay!
Any suggestions or warnings?
Oh, how much time do you have?
How long is this?
I don't think we're going to be here that long.
No. Recognize that this will take more time than standing up in front of a class, probably, both for you and your students. And while there face-to-face and equivalent hours for the credit hours is the same, it takes longer to read and write than it takes to listen and talk. So even if you know what you want to say in online, you have to be concise. You can't talk around the barn like you do in a face-to-face class discussion. So it all takes a lot longer, and that's going to take a lot more of your time too. So don't get shocked by that.
But because of that, and this is a hard lesson, it's one I'm still reminding myself of, and working on with all of my classes, because I am not concise. I have never been concise. But I think your videos and any informational documents, the briefer you can get them. Like, I'm trying to get all my instructions for most assignments to a one-pager because their attention does not linger on instructional documents, nor does it linger on long videos. So if you have a lot to say, I would recommend breaking them up rather than trying to do one big long video. And yeah, brevity is the name of the game with that. Yeah.
I would say another thing to consider for yourself is it's okay to make mistakes. Just acknowledge it. Somebody told me, and I wish I could remember who it was because I'd like to go back to them and tell them I think they're wrong. But I was
probably
told,
me.
don't let students know that you made a mistake, or don't let them see you sweat, basically, that if you're new, don't tell them you're new, act like you've been doing this before. But what I found was when I would tell my students, I goofed, let me give you an extra day to do this because I messed up or the link didn't work and that's on me. I've been doing this a long time, and I thought all my links were working, and a student emailed me over the weekend and said, this link to this video goes to a syllabus attachment. I don't know how that happened because it had never been linked to a syllabus attachment. It had been linked to the video. Well, the video, somebody at ABC News had changed the name of the video, so I don't know why it went to the syllabus attachment, but it did, and I couldn't find the link. Well, it had worked. So I just said, oops, sorry, I'm not sure how that happened, but it happened, I screwed up, I fixed it, and move on. But I think the students appreciate that you're honest with them, and I just, the first semester I did it, I was in over my head because I had all online classes, and I really was struggling. But I felt like because I let my students know that, I didn't act like I didn't know what I was doing at all. But if I made a mistake or if I realized something didn't work the way I thought it should work, I just said, hey, this didn't go like I thought it was going to. Let's try something different next time and let's do it this way. And so I'm not sure where that advice came from, but I just feel like it's better to be honest with them and let them know you're trying to, that it's new for them, a lot of them. I think, Leslie, you alluded to that. Your students may still be trying to figure out where the tabs are in D2L. You may be too. There's always something new that D2L does every semester, and something that, I couldn't find the class list at one point when that changed, and realized that, I was only emailing a portion of the class because I didn't have it set to have 50 people or 100 people, whatever, and only the people on the screen were getting the message. And so I had several people irritated because they didn't know that the class did X. And I'm like, well, I don't know why you didn't know that. I've been sending out emails. Well, little did I know I wasn't sending them to the whole class because I thought I was. I apologized profusely, caught them up, and moved on. But that was certainly on me. But if I'd acted like, well, I didn't make a mistake, I don't think they wouldn't have given me the benefit of the doubt later on when I really needed the benefit of the doubt.
So I would also add that being as present as possible is really important, especially in a remote class, an online class. So if you have discussions, I don't recommend answering every single post. I really don't recommend answering every single post.
And you don't need to.
But you really don't need to. Set it up so that they're interacting, but be in there. It shows you value that activity, and it shows you're actually part of that discussion. And you can, that's where I kind of pop in my expertise from time to time. Answer their emails pretty promptly. And, a couple videos of yourself, whether you like it or not, are pretty good for letting them see there's a human being on the other end. And feedback. Feedback on their assignments is super valuable, and it shows them that you're paying attention to their progress. Right, that's important in any class, but I think online it's especially important.
Because they're just kind of hanging by their Ethernet cord or their wireless cord.
Whatever it is.
Yeah, so, they write that question, and then they're just kind of lost in space until somebody decides to reach out and respond to them. So, let them know that you're on top of it.
And you may need to, and I know this isn't always a popular thing with people, but you may have to be more engaged with your email than you would normally like to be, but telling them what to expect from your responses, that, if you respond within 24 hours, let them know that you will be responding within 24 or 48 or whatever the amount is, so that they know what to expect. If they think they're going to get an immediate response and, it's 3 o'clock in the morning and you're not going to respond at 3 o'clock in the morning, at least let them know.
Or on the weekends.
Or on
it's
the
okay.
weekends that, you may have limited, time to respond on the weekend, but let them know what what to expect from you. And that way, if they do complain, you can say, but I've explained to you from the get-go that this is what I do Monday through Friday, and on the weekend, I'll check once or twice. But if you're waiting until 11 o'clock to ask about an assignment that's due at 11:30, it may be too late. Same way it would be with a face-to-face class, but because a lot of them, if they're not here, a lot of my students are not even here. They can't come to my office. They will never come to my office. A lot of them don't even come to graduation because they're literally not anywhere near here. So that is their lifeline, and your response means more than you might think it means. That they're always surprised when I respond. To me, sometimes I think it's taken me a while because it's been like, I got the message at 8 o'clock in the morning, but I couldn't respond till 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and they still think it's fast. And I'm like, oh, because I was thinking that was horrible. And they're like, thank you for the quick response. So, and good luck. And you've got people to ask. So, and please don't hesitate to ask questions. I owe the people in my department who put up with 1,001 questions, and Alison now gets them all.
It's symbiotic. It's okay.
We've got to go to lunch. If you ever want to go to lunch and just say, okay, what do I do with this?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think too that technical support is fabulous.
Yes, it is.
Oh yeah,
absolutely.
Everybody is just fabulous. So don't be afraid to ask for technical help too. Really, that's great.
One of the greatest resources that I think any of us have at ETSU.
It's right
ATS.
here.
Yeah. It's here. It's
Yes.
ATS.
I wholeheartedly agree with that.
ATS. They are the lifeline for all of us.
And I say
online.
technical, but also like in doing things, like just having, there is in the back, come down with your course, they'll just like, Anthony, does this make sense? It's like, or am I way off base because it's online and I don't know what I'm doing? So not just technical, all kinds of great advice helps tremendously.
Yes, you've earned some dessert. We had a couple of questions forwarded by email. I only remember one because that's the. Did you print that?
I printed them off. I burned
What was
paper.
the first one? Because I don't remember that one.
They had two questions. One was some strategies to prevent or address cheating in an online assessment. Turn it in. Turn it in.
Yeah.
I never have a write a paper kind of assignment that I do not have plugged into Turn It In. And I let students know that I open it up so that they can check it. It's not that it's just, this is a test and I'm going to catch you kind of thing. But I'll try to encourage them to finish that paper a couple of days early maybe, and then submit it in there. Take a look at it just in case they were doing something late at night or early in the morning and they were tired and they didn't do it quite right. Then they can get that feedback. I don't care how many times they submit it. I'm only going to grade the last one submitted that is before the end of the due date period. If it's after the due date, then there's other issues. But I'm only going to look at that one, so if they want to put in 6 of them, it's okay with me. So Turn It In, I think, is very valuable for those.
For the written work. For assessments in the exams, I don't use the cheating video stuff that we have the option to don't we? We have the option to ask students to pay for that service, and then they have to show their ID before they take the test, and then you have that video you can go back to if you suspect something. You're not going to sit through 25 hours of watching students take exams unless you feel the need to. What I try to do, I first of all operate on a couple of assumptions. One is I can't force them to have a closed book test. If they're over there, I don't know whether it's open or closed. So I'm going to assume that it's an open book, open note test. And therefore, my questions are different. They are not going to be the definition of blank is whatever. choose from A, B, C, or D. I'm going to choose questions that test for understanding, deeper comprehension and application. So they cannot quickly answer several questions like that. They may be unsure of a few and be able to look them up, and if so, great. If they got it right, they just learned something while they were taking the test. So that still meets my instructional needs. So the other part of that, you might have inferred, is I time them so that they can't spend forever looking up every single answer. They have to have been prepared to take the test. And if they're well prepared, they may have enough time there that if they're not sure about a few answers, they can do a little bit more learning to try to figure that out.
And in the system, you can also randomize the
Oh, yeah.
questions and randomize the answers. You know, your 4, 6, whatever, multiple choice answers. You can randomize all that so that student A and student B can't necessarily just sit next to each other and say, I'll do the odd number, you do the evening, and we'll each put down. Yeah.
Good thought.
And that helps. I mean, you know,
And
for every mousetrap you build, there'll be a better mouse, you know.
And I don't give tests. So I have one class where they have a quiz on plagiarism and citations, but I want it to be open book because I want them in the APA manual. So I tell them, you know, use your APA manual on this. I guess they could still cheat if they worked off of each other, but it is randomized. So, but I want them to be in the manual to do that. Everything else, I either give them options for assignments, so they're probably not all doing the same thing, or even if they do the same, they may choose the same option, but they may do it on a different topic. So there's not a lot of, I think the only time I've actually been aware that somebody was cheating, and that's the other thing about being in the discussion boards, you know how they write. Because they are less likely to suddenly write differently on papers than they do in discussions. So if they can't write a complete sentence in discussions, they're not suddenly going to write a thesis in their paper. I say that because I actually had a student who never wrote a complete sentence in a discussion board, and when I read the paper, I'm like, this sounds like NPR. I was joking. I Googled a section of the paper that was using some language that just didn't sound like the student, and lo and behold, it was right off the NPR website, honest to gosh. And after that, I thought, well, we won't be doing that anymore. But because they have choices and it's not the same thing, there's not a lot of incentive. I mean, it's hard to cheat.
It's just harder.
It's
you
hard
just kind
to
of build
cheat.
it at the front end to make it
So if
unlikely
they do cheat, I mean, it's like, okay, in your work environment, how would you handle, you know, just develop a project or a proposal for addressing an issue in your work environment? Well, you know, that's a little harder to cheat on than if you've got an essay that, you know, they could go buy an essay somewhere. So that's how
Application.
Yeah, it's a lot of application, and I've got students with all different backgrounds, so they're not going to be in the same type of work setting or different areas. So I've got a little bit of a different situation, I think, because my students are all over the place professionally, but it makes it a lot harder or it's not harder to cheat, it's just less likely that there's a reason to. Plus, they like having choice, and they're not as likely to, you know, mess with that, because it's like, well, you know, I got a choice in this, so why would I pick something that I would have to go, you know, buy the essay for? If I can, you know, if I've got a choice in this, I'm choosing the one that I want to do. So that helps a lot too. At least I think it does.
I agree.
Well, that's what Allison said too. We give a lot of little tests just to try to keep their attention, but then at some point they got obsessed with the tests, you know, semester after, and then I went, finally this last time I said, look, this is all open book. Nobody's looking over your shoulder. I just want you to look it up and learn something like where you find it, not get all excited about these tiny little tests that don't even like add up to much. They're really just to try to get your attention. So finally, you know, we did in the beginning start telling them, this is all open book.
Yeah.
Don't
You
sweat
might.
it. Everybody can get 100.
I just
go look it up. That's what we want you to do.
I just operate on that assumption and go from there.
I think in line, it seems to me in our short experience that they do get more, they they, meaning the students, get more about the test. And I don't know.
Yeah, especially if you time them.
Yeah, it's funny.
Well, they can't ask questions if you're sitting in a face-to-face classroom. You may not answer their questions, but they can still ask them.
Yeah.
And online, once they get started, there's no, I got a question. I didn't understand what you meant by this, or what is this word? You know, is this right? And they can't do that once you get into it, which means you have to really be careful about how you've written your test questions, because if you've written a bad test question and they're stressing out over it, that's kind of on you as the instructor, which is probably why I don't like doing tests, because I would probably mess up the test question or not have, you know, I would randomize it and somehow randomize the right answer just right out of it.
So our other question was about the SAIs?
Yeah.
Right, that's the one I remembered.
SAI items, they were looking for any suggestions for SAI items regarding online experience for students.
So that required me to actually look up what the SAI questions are right now. The ones that probably are relevant to instruction. And so those are questions 6 through 13. And some of them actually, I wonder how online students answer those. I wonder what their interpretation is, because there's one that says managed course time effectively, and that can be interpreted a number of ways when you're not on ground. But so here are the questions. Made course expectations clear, was well prepared. That's another one that I don't know how they interpret. Managed course time effectively, clearly explained course content, showed interest in my learning, helped me increase my knowledge and/or skills in the content of this course, provided me with meaningful feedback, and was helpful when I had questions and sought assistance. So I have 3 that I just thought of off the top of my head before I came over. One is responding to communications in a timely way. Might be a good one to get an assessment on. Organizing the content in the online class so that I could find everything easily. And
that navigation piece.
Something
Was
about
the course
that.
easy to navigate?
Right.
Could you find
Could you
what
find
you were
everything?
looking for, whether that was the assessment or the
It's a
additional
Sisyphean task.
information?
And creating online assignments that help me to learn the course content, which maybe is already addressed in some of these other questions, but do the assignments feel meaningful for learning? Well, it already has meaningful feedback as a pre-existing question. I think, well, Susan knows this for sure, and I steal her anecdote about it, that the number one complaint students have about online courses is that the instructor is not responsive.
Yeah.
And that's the only way they can get in touch with you is through online communications. And so you've got to be much more responsive, because you're not going to see them on Tuesdays and Thursdays.
I think and I didn't come up with the wording for this, but I thought if we could put a question in there that talked about faculty presence in the course. And it may be, did you feel that your faculty was present and participating in the course? It may be something as simple as that.
I like that.
To get that presence.
And I had that, yeah.
You know,
And you can do this without having an SAI question. Because
You don't have to wait.
Well, you don't have to wait, and you probably don't want to wait either. But if you wait till the SAIs, you have lost an opportunity for the class you're currently teaching. So one of the things, a friend of mine is an owner-operator at the West Market Street Chick-fil-A, and he was telling me one day after he taught a Sunday school class, he said, okay, tell me what I need to stop, start, and continue doing when I teach Sunday school. And I'm going, whoa, slow down. Nobody's ever asked that before. And he goes, no, I do this with my staff at Chick-fil-A, and we do a start, stop, continue on a fairly regular basis to find out what we need to stop doing, start doing, and continue doing. And he said that's quick and easy, not easy necessarily, but it's quick feedback, and it puts it in everybody who works for me can understand start, stop, and continue. You're not asking them things that you might have to, what do they mean by that? well, what do you mean by course expectations? I don't really know what that means. But he said, stop, start, and continue. Everybody knows what that means. So I started doing a stop, start, continue with my students and asked them that question. I wasn't ready to do it for me. So I started it with them, and about midterm, a little before midterm, I will put that in as just put it in the announcements, and I do give them a bonus point if they want to do it. If I ask them, you can do this on your own, you don't have to submit it, because then you're telling me what you need, what you've self-assessed. But if you want to submit it, then you're eligible for a bonus point. Well, then I started doing it after I, got a few of those, and they're remarkably honest with themselves about because I could tell you what they should be doing or not doing. They're aware. They really do know what's going on. And they'll tell you if you ask them. And I've noticed they also start doing the things, having them do that, they recognize it. So then I added in, okay, also need to do that with me. And so what can I, stop, start, continue doing? And some of them freak out over that. They're like, I'm not telling you that right now because it's not the end of the semester and I haven't got my grade yet. But I tell them I want to know, because if there's something I can do to change something right now, that will have an impact on you. If you don't tell me till the end of the semester, I may never have you in class again, and I don't have that opportunity. So I would suggest not even waiting, whoever asked that question out in the ethosphere there, not waiting until the SAIs, and to do something. It doesn't have to be start, stop, continue, but that's just a real easy one to do, to get that feedback on how you're doing. And it may be that you get something you don't like, but it doesn't mean you have to, you don't have to do that, but at least if a lot of people are saying, hey, really like how you respond to feedback, and please keep doing that. Well, you've got your attaboy and your attagirl and pat on your back, and you go, yes, I'm doing that well. If there's something that they need, that they say stop doing, Alison, don't send so many emails. I'm picking on you.
I know.
But, what if it's something you don't know that you're doing? It may be something about your videos, or maybe something about your readings, who knows, but at least it gives you something before the end of the semester, and then they can see that if you have made a change, and you can say, hey, thanks for the feedback. Based on that feedback, here's what we're going to do moving forward. Obviously, you don't want to change something that will, negatively affect them. Suddenly you move up a due date and they're thinking it's 2 weeks later. But it gives you feedback in a very, easy to understand manner, and it doesn't take interpreting questions that may not be clear to everybody.
I have used, in fact, this term I've used both. I've used that method, and then I've used a different one I'll tell you in a second. The issue I have, Susan's doing this probably a better way by asking students to self-assess before they her-assess. I just asked about the class. And stop, start, continue, one fallibility of that method is the first two things are things they want you to change about the class. Well, it's like, stop asking us to do so much work and start asking us to, start giving us more time to, and it was all stuff that was like non-negotiable. So another, it's a three letter thing is called an SII that comes from the Pogel Institute, and that's strengths, improvements, and insights. And that gives them, first of all, they start the process by talking about what you're doing well.
That's a good point.
Improvements suggests here are ways to improve it so it's more constructive than it is just like stop doing this.
Like that, yeah.
And then insights is like what are you learning, or what are you getting out of this? And I feel like, now I did this at 2 different times in the course, and that could have made the difference too, but I felt like the SII gave me a little bit more to go on. But either of those, just getting some feedback from your students is really helpful.
I love discussion boards. It's like, to me, discussion boards, that's the class,
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
You can read all this other stuff or watch this other stuff. But one that I like to throw in is, what's your muddiest point? And I'll throw it in about midterm, maybe a little bit before sometime, to say, what is the muddiest thing in the course right up to this point? And that could be content. It might be a part of the subject matter that they're going, I don't get it. You know, help me understand that concept better. But I also get comments about, you know, where is this, or I can't find this, or I'm drowning in discussion boards, or
Stop asking us to talk so much.
Stop doing this, you know, that kind of stuff. So, and it's just a different way of saying it. That to say, you know, what's your muddiest point? What is it that you can't see, that you can't get through right now? How can I help you? And you know, some interesting feedback on that sometime. Not all of it do I want to hear, but you know, it's the way it goes.
But sometimes they'll, in their honesty,
it can make me better.
It does. It makes you better. And I did this in my face-to-face class. For the first time, I asked about me in a face-to-face class, and I had them do it. Like, I was writing on the board, and of course, I have a lot of international students, and they were not comfortable with that. But I had them do it with them first. They did themselves, and then I said, okay, to show them how consistent they were, that they all had some of the same issues, they all needed to do the same things, and they all, you know, recognized that they were waiting till the last minute to do stuff, whatever. And then when I asked them to do that with me, what do I need to start, stop, continue doing, it did freak them out at first. But I said, I can't improve if I don't know what the issues are. And one of the students spoke up and said, well, you can stop asking how you're doing because you're doing great. And I thought, oh, that's so sweet. Yeah, that's really cool. So, you know, I didn't ask expecting that response, but I thought, well, because he just kind of had this, you know, funny look on his face. He was like, why do you keep asking us this? Because you're doing fine. But that was confirmation that, okay, I am doing okay, that I don't have to keep second guessing everything I'm doing, because I hadn't taught face-to-face in a while. So it was a change going from online to face-to-face, but I thought, well, that's good to know that, you know, if I think something's not going well, and it really is, then I don't need to keep second guessing myself. And because I tend to do that. I'm a firstborn child, so everything's got to be my fault, and, you know, I've got to be responsible for everything and perfect. And as Myra tells me, don't spend 3 hours on a 2-minute video. You're not perfect when you speak for 2 minutes in class. Why should your video be perfect? And, you know, do it and move on. But that's good information to have.
And all of these things that we've been talking about build that sense of a learning community. It pulls the faculty and the students together. It pulls the students together and makes it more of a community that sometimes online we have a harder time seeing that we have that. And when we're all sitting in the classroom and we can see, you know, the nonverbals, then, you know, we can see the eyes rolling and the sleeping and the whatevers. Then we know that there's that community there. But online, sometimes it's harder to see that there really is that connection. And so all of these things can help build that community.
The biggest compliment I got on SAIs, and I wish I had kept the SAI thing to, well, I've got it somewhere, I just have to go find it, but to frame it, one of the students said, well, one initially said I should be a ditch digger instead of a teacher, but that's okay. When one of the students said, this is the most like a face-to-face class I've ever had with online, that is, to this day, that is the biggest compliment I have ever gotten, I think, as a teacher about an online class, because that was my goal. And when I teach face-to-face, I feel like I do a good job of developing a relationship with the students that I really felt like I struggled with online. But when I got that, I was like, oh my gosh, yes. You know, that was just, okay, if I just continue doing that, all the other stuff will fall into place. But that, to me, was the biggest compliment. And I said that in a college meeting one day, and somebody looked at me and I heard them mumbling under their breath, I can't believe you thought that was a compliment. I thought, well, you've obviously never taught online, so you can just sit down and be quiet. Because the people who taught online were all sitting there nodding, and this person who'd never really taught online just thought that was silly. But everybody else, you know, who came up afterwards, oh my gosh, I would love to get that, you know. Like, yes, because that's when you know you're doing something right. And that's where learning occurs, is when the students feel like it is a community and you've invited them into that community and you are part of it. It's not just a class where the students do their thing and you post some grades every now and then, and it takes that. So.
Sorry.
What-
How do you feel about making videos, like doing video feedback?
Just did some today.
Yeah. I mean, is it just easier? Is that way you can just talk about it?
I actually give both. So I allow my students to submit the drafts of their lesson plan for non-graded feedback before it comes in for graded feedback. It's purely optional. I think it's hard for them to watch video feedback and remember everything. So I do some notations in their document just by comment.
Why is that it's hard for them to remember video more?
Well, I think when they're going back to make all the changes, then it becomes hard. What did she say? And that you know, just kind of keeping track of everything. So I do make notations, but often I'll just make it brief. What a video does is gives them the nonverbal expressions that come with it that keep me from sounding less than pleasant in my feedback, because I'm trying to keep my written feedback short. So sometimes I'll just make a couple, you know, a sentence or phrase and just say, see video. And that's where I'm like, I mean, I did one yesterday. I was like, girlfriend, you got to work on your plural possessives because you are not putting in apostrophes. But I was able to do it there and say, just do it and, you know, laugh a little bit about it instead of it being like this cranky comment.
A summary checklist.
Something, you know, I just do the little comments in Word. It was a Word document. And then I record on Screencast-O-Matic. I do a picture-in-picture, I walk through, you know, the main points with them and then send it off to them. I think I can get richer and more detailed feedback in a video, but it can be time-consuming. So I think you have to choose the times you want to do that versus something quicker like a rubric. So I do both. Depends on the assignment.
Didn't you guys set up like if you have someone who can't understand something and you feel like you've gone around the men and around the men
15 times?
If I
Yes.
could just see this person, if they would just come in and sit with me, which has happened, right? And then I can go see, and they go, oh yeah, and they walk away. But you can't obviously do that with everybody. So any of you set up like an extra, like a WebEx session, so you could, if they can do it, if they have it available for an online student, so that I've been thinking about that. Like I could just, you know, hold it up and go, see, you know,
Yeah.
then they would get it.
Yeah.
I-
WebEx, share your screen, phone calls,
The
Skype.
phone calls, I've done phone calls.
Yeah.
And a long time ago, I've done a WebEx. I actually do teach some on-ground. It's a little bit hybridized right now for that purpose to some degree, to set eyes on them and see if the comprehension is there, explain the stuff that they're not accessing online to understand for themselves.
Right.
Yeah.
Because they're not, because the stuff's all there online. It's just that I keep getting I don't understand this, I don't understand this, and they don't, because they're not getting it turned in, and I'm trying to figure out how you manage that.
I think a WebEx is a great, like an optional WebEx or a WebEx meeting is a great idea.
I need to do something to be able to have face-to-face, because every time we do it face-to-face, it's like quick, it's like 2 seconds. Oh, I understand, you know, what you're saying, and then we keep trying to refine it online, but we're still getting it. I know.
Yeah, you may have to do a little bit of synchronous meeting somehow.
Yeah, and a phone call is, I mean, if they can just hear your voice and you can, you know, look at something on the screen, even if, because a lot of my students work in hospitals and they're not allowed to be on the computer or their phones, and so sometimes it's a challenge to get scheduling. You know, they get off shift at 2 o'clock in the morning, and I'm probably not going to be up then. I mean, I would if that was the only time they could meet, but sometimes it just takes the phone call and just hearing your voice, as opposed to, because I feel like I explain things better in writing than I do talking sometimes, but I think sometimes just hearing your voice and knowing that you're not being ugly when they think you are, and you know, you're like, that wasn't ugly, but they interpret it that way because it's telling them something they need to do, and they interpret it differently. So I think sometimes just hearing it, hearing that your inflection is, oh, okay, you know, they're not being mean, they're actually pretty nice. So even if you can just get a phone call, that.
And it gives them that chance to talk around that subject and circle it until they can bullseye it. Because a lot of times, because they don't understand, so they have to go off on these little tangents before they can center to it, and that gives them that chance to do that, and they may wind up saying, oh, I understood more than I thought I did, or it's that question that they didn't know to ask you in writing, or you didn't know to answer in writing, that because, you know, a simple phone call most of the time does it.
Yeah, because sometimes the questions.
And sometimes that's easier than setting up WebEx, even though WebEx is not hard to set up. It creates more nerves. You know, people get a little bit more nervous about it, and am I doing this technology the correct way? And you know.
Well, and you can have a phone call anywhere. I mean, with a cell phone, you can have a phone call anywhere. If you have to be sitting at a computer, that may restrict, you know, both people a little more. But I think, like you said, what the questions they ask are not always the questions they really
Actually
think
have.
they're asking, or that they really have. So when you can talk to them and you can say, okay, let's back up. Exactly what is it you're having difficulty with? Because sometimes I've found that the questions they ask me in email is really not what the issue. I mean, that's really not what they're not understanding. That's just the question they know to ask, but it's really not what the problem is, because I'm looking at it going, I don't know why you're asking that, because that's not what I've
I've
that
already
wasn't
said
the
this
feedback.
answer 8 times.
Yeah. So let's start over but again, you can do that on a phone call, and you can go back and forth a lot faster than you can. I mean, you can do it by email, but with that lag, it's like, oh gosh, what did they say, you know, a day and a half ago? I'm going to have to go look that back up.
And I do think it's missing the personal thing a lot of the time, that connection.
Just along that note, do you do some sort of scheduled office hour kind of thing with your online classes?
I don't, because right now my schedule is not, I would have difficulty having set office hours. So what I tell my students is, if you need to come in or we need to meet somewhere, I will meet you at Starbucks. I will, we will schedule a phone call at your convenience and mine, because again, a lot of my students are working shifts, so they're not standard, times where they end up pulling a double. So from my students, that flexibility, that if we need to talk at 10 o'clock at night, that's what we do. It doesn't have to be between 8 and 4:30 when I would have, I guess you're talking about virtual office hours as opposed to.
Just something that's kind of there weekly.
I don't, because my schedule's not the same every week, and it would be, I feel like for me, I would rather say, let's schedule something at your convenience rather than I'm going to have office hours at this time, and then, oh yeah, well this week I can't do that, and that just gets confusing. So, and that has not been an issue so far.
I do have office hours.
Do you? Because I keep saying I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
And then I'm like you. I go, well, wow, this came up, and I'm always afraid that I'm going to be the one that messes this up, for the students. And so I do a lot of, please, let me know, and we can, setting up a phone conference or Skype or WebEx is no big deal. It's easy, just I have to rely on you to let me know.
And I do actually have office hours, which I'm pretty good about. Every once in a while, because online, a lot of students end up not coming or contacting you, but I do try to prioritize. Like if they email during that time, to get a quick response to them during that time. And if I have to make a scheduled adjustment, then I let them know in advance, and I either have makeup or I do virtual, I call it virtual office hours if I have to be at home with a sick kid or something like that.
I went kicking and screaming into getting my email on my phone. I absolutely refused to do that for a while, because I didn't want the junk mail coming in. But then I realized I was able to respond to them a lot faster and probably stressed me out less that, oh, okay, I've got that met. That's an easy response. I can just take care of that right now. I also spent a lot of time sitting at football practice that I couldn't really be doing anything else. So I just found that it's really not that big of a deal. I know some people are very protective of their time, and if you are, that's great. But I find that, if I can, if I'm doing something else and the message comes in and it's going to take more than what I really want to try to thumb type out, I wait till I'm sitting at a computer. But if it's something quick, I just go ahead and take care of it. And that's as much for me as it is for them. And I know that may sound weird, but if I can get one email taken care of out of the big long stream of them, I'm happy. So for me, that works, getting my email on my phone and being able to respond fairly quickly, and then I can move on and they can move on, and they're not waiting, because there have been a few that have come in like at 10 o'clock at night, and I just really didn't want to have to go sit down at the computer and deal with it. But then the next morning I wished I had. So it was kind of one of those things where, God, if I had taken 30 seconds last night to respond to this very quick email, I wouldn't be spending 3 minutes on it or whatever the next morning. So. I'm curious, if y'all don't mind me asking, what are your biggest challenges with online?
Well, one used to be that my students seemed really confused on how to navigate. So what I did to kind of fix that is I recorded a lot of short little videos that I have one that I put up that I walk through the entire course of. Go, here's the content tab, let's click on it and see what's in it. And I do that for every tab. And then I record another video that goes over, I have several assignments, so I record one video per assignment to go over the details and like show them where everything's at and the quizzes and how to access that. And that seemed to cut down. That was one of Allison's suggestions to me for my planning class, and that seemed to cut down on a lot of issues this semester with another online class that I'm teaching. So thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, I was thinking it was a great idea, and I don't remember giving you that advice.
Just by putting in a little more time on the front end and saving a lot of time on the back end.
That's true. I mean, building online courses is just a lot of front-end time to get everything in place.
Which a lot of people don't realize if they've never taught online, because it's different when you can go in and, oh yeah, let's do that tomorrow. And you can do that in a face-to-face class, but with online, you don't just throw something at them and go, oh yeah, by the way, you're going to read 12 more things for tomorrow. You just can't do that. So you really have to be more prepared on the front end.
For me, it's the balance of spoon-feeding them and then letting them go too much. I mean, how do you, and in a class, if you assign some reading and you're having a discussion in class, you know who's getting it and who isn't, and there are things you don't want people to miss, so do you deliver that information, then they don't have to read it all? So to me, it's just striking that balance.
Yeah.
That's my biggest challenge. And I teach only graduate students, so they should be able to dig in and get most of it. But
I think one of the areas, and I don't like to do the video thing. I don't like my voice either, but I will force myself to do an audio file sometime. Especially I find it in discussion boards where maybe they've had great discussion, but there's a couple of points that I want to make absolutely sure they get. Well, at the end of that discussion period, I might do an audio file to say, food for thought. Just take it the next level. You don't have to write about it, but think about this. And I'll hit some of those points. Or I'll do summing it all up kind of title to say, this is what I heard you all saying in your discussion, and there were some great points here and there and the other place. And my walk away from our discussion was ... which typically correspond with those key points I wanted to make anyway. Or maybe I just wanted to bring them out that somebody may have looked over them. And I think I've had some of those comments from students saying, wow, it was like we were really in class together. And like you, it's like,
that.
I'll just float for months off that one. That makes me feel like, okay, I did that one right.
The other thing I do, so we may not hit everything I wish they would talk about in discussions, because I do give them I give them a fair bit of autonomy and choice in our discussion boards about what to talk about. But then I follow up with assignments where there are parameters where they have to be using some of that material and applying it. So if they haven't been talking about it, they haven't had the chance to figure out how to apply it later on. So that's kind of another way I've gotten around, but I'm going to take that one. I like that. That's a good idea.
Yeah, I used to do a weekly reflection at the end of, and I'd kind of gotten away from that because I had classes that were really doing a good job with getting everything, so I kind of went away from it because I felt like it was just going to be repeating what they'd already done. But the advantage of doing something like that is what I found is my better students post earlier in the week, and even though they don't have to really read the ones that are posted at 11:50 at night, which are generally not very good. And if any of my students are listening, I'm telling you right now, those that come in at 11:50 at night are usually not very good. But that's the reality of it. But every now and then somebody will post something at the last minute that's really good. But I know that, I wasn't in there at 11:50 to read it. I didn't get to see it until after the board closed. So if somebody does do that, I will do, not as much as I used to, but I'll say, hey, at the end of last week, in case you missed this, here's something that, the ICYMT or whatever it is, in case you missed this thing that you see on social media.
I wouldn't have ever figured that out.
I've seen that a lot lately, so I'm like, oh yeah,
no, I haven't seen that.
I'd have to write you a note.
So
and say,
what do you mean by that? In case you missed this piece, throwing that in a weekly reflections kind of thing, or if somebody brought up or somebody
Really
mentioned
insight.
a link or another site, and say, hey, make sure that you check this out. And that's a good way to sort of wrap things up. Because sometimes I'll find something after somebody mentions something, and I go look up, I'll go out there online and see if I can find something, and that wasn't in the course to begin with, but hey, here's something you might want to check out if you have time. So that's kind of all different ways to do that, but it gets Virginia goes back to making sure you're getting across everything you want to, but that they've got more opportunity to engage with whatever the topic is.
Do any of you do group projects in your
I have done. I'm not currently doing.
It's horrible.
Group projects.
Group projects.
Group projects.
I've done it for a long time doing group
Yes.
projects, and I finally
It's a
graduated,
brave
so
thing you're doing.
And luckily, it's worked out pretty well so far, because I have a large number of students in my online class, and I have a really beneficial assignment, but to have each one of them do it individually was going to take me all semesters and give them good quality feedback on it, so I put them in groups. But the thing that I'm struggling with right now is, how do you deal with I do peer evaluations for members
Yes.
of the group. So how do you objectively do the peer evaluation piece and adjust grades based on the peer feedback that's coming in?
How are you doing? So you're assessing that a separate way, right?
Peer evaluation.
Yeah, you've made your own peer evaluation form.
Like, they get a peer evaluation form that I've kind of standardized and used in all my classes where I do
Okay.
projects. And then it's just, the way I explain it to them is, this is really my only insight into the group dynamic and how you guys worked as a team. And did one person carry all the weight or most of the weight? Did, you know, one person not participate at all? And if they didn't, you know, they certainly don't deserve the same grade as everybody else that is doing the project. But I'm at a point right now, I don't know how to gently make that adjustment based on the feedback that's kind of coming in. So I don't know if there's a better way to do the theory file or scrap it all together.
I'm going to show you what I have done, because that's a reason. So in case it didn't get picked up online, the question is how to adjust grades for individuals within teams based on how they're performing in the team. I have, when I have done group work in my online classes, I use this CAPME system. And I just got an email today that said they're going to be making adjustments to this. So I don't know what they'll look like. But you can get a free account if you email them for it. And you can create, I'm going to see if I can find one here, an old one. You can create surveys of how they do in the case. So I did it three rounds of a single case study, and they had to complete the survey as part of that. So here are the categories that they rated each other and themselves on. And then when you get the feedback, I gotta go back, look at this. I'm not trying to modify it. Go back. It gives you basically, what you get is a weighted score. So, and it comes close to a 1, but if they have not done a really good job and their teammates have all rated them downwards, it kind of goes down to like 0.8 or 0.6 or lower. And what I have done is taken the team score, and then if it's significantly low, like below 0.8, I prorate it downwards, sort of percentage-wise, based on that score. So from the team score, I give them whatever percent score they have, like a 70%, they get 70% of that team score as their grade. And what CAPME does that's really nice, and I haven't been on this site for a while, so I can't quickly and adroitly find this stuff to show you easily, but it will actually send the teams their team's collective feedback. No comments. Any comments they make come to you as the faculty member, as the instructor, but they don't see each other's comments. They just see the averaged team rating compared to their own self-rating. And for every category that they're getting feedback on, it comes with stock tips on how to improve on that skill. So for contributing to teamwork, it will come with some stock. You might want to explain that to your students. I had one highly offended student who thought she was doing really well but got all these tips on how to improve. I'm like, everybody gets that. It wasn't you. But I think it's great because that gives you a lot of good feedback on how you're doing. And then for you as the instructor, you see that score, and I just used that score with some degree of error adjusted in there. If a student got particularly highly rated by everybody because they were doing much more of the work, I might even give them a higher than team score. So adjust theirs individually upward.
So you're saying if their rating comes back and the max you can get is a 1, right? If their rating comes back and let's say collectively they're about 0.6, then you adjust it down to a 60?
Like a 60, roughly like a 60% of, I might toggle that a little bit, but that's kind of how I adjusted for individual performance within the team's work. Sorry, I can't find, it's giving me a hard time about something there.
I'm not smart enough to figure out the system.
It's not hard. Trust me, it doesn't
You've
take
shown
long.
it to me before, and I felt like I needed a degree in rocket science.
You do not need a degree in rocket science.
I have one class where it's an interdisciplinary healthcare teams class, so to not have a group project would be pretty ridiculous. So I have to do that. Sometimes it goes real well, and sometimes not. But when they do a group project in that class, I have them do a self-assessment as well as a group team assessment, and I do a point system for my classes, so all my classes are 100 points. Because again, I'm not smart enough to figure out what, 30% of 759 points is. So everything's 100 points. So for that particular assignment, let's say if that assignment is 20 points, I tell them as part of their self-assessment and their team assessment, they have to tell me if, the maximum points available is 20 for that assignment. How many points do they think they have earned based on what they contributed to the group project? And then for each of their teammates, the 20. The confusing part is some of them think they're splitting the 20 points so that they're, first time I did it, it was like, so-and-so got 12 points and so-and-so, and it all added up to 20. I'm like, well, this doesn't make any sense because the person who did most of the work still only had like a 12, which didn't make any sense. So I've had to revise that a little bit. But I just asked them to explain their score and to tell me what they did and what their teammates did. And it's really not that far off consistency. And I realize, the teams are generally small, but the ones who do the work usually get the credit for doing the work, both by themselves and their teammates. Sometimes they rate themselves a little lower because they don't want to say, I did all the work or I did most of the work. But you can generally tell that by reading the other comments. But because I have a number and I've got qualitative and quantitative information, and by that time I can generally tell from discussion boards and their other work the quality of what each one of them is doing. So I have some of my own, it's not real object, I don't know, it's objective and subjective as well, but I have some general idea that, if this person's always late getting stuff in, it's probably not likely that they suddenly, were the one pulling really, they were not the lead dog on the sled kind of thing. But that allows me to say, okay, well, and then a lot of times I just average the points to see how it comes out. And then if that seems reasonable based on what they said they have done and what their teammates said they have done, then that way not everybody gets the same score. And I tell them that up front, that it's a group project, but your score is not, and that keeps the person who's always going to do the work to make sure they get the grade. It prevents them from being able to pull everybody along, and the other people don't have to do anything. Again, it's graduate school, so they shouldn't be doing that anyway. But there have been times when I've gotten messages from people, so and so never responds to emails. We agreed that we would text or whatever it is, and they haven't done that. I said, put that in your evaluation. You do what you need to do, but you make sure that you put that in your evaluation, because if you don't, I don't have any way of knowing that. You have to tell me what it was like to work with that person as a teammate. And because it's a team's class, that's kind of the point, is to have to work together as a team, because you don't always want to do that. But in the work environment, you're going to have to. So it's got a real world application to it as well, that if their colleague is not doing what they're supposed to do on the job, it's your duty to,
You've got to
communicate
communicate with them.
Communicate that.
Yeah,
you
you
have
have
to
to
let
address
somebody know and address it.
Right.
So.
And I think just the struggle, because I've explained it the same way to them too, that you just said. The struggle that I was having is, well, how much do I dock, like, their overall grade? But I've been sitting here making notes on, I had a couple ideas on how to change it. So
That's good.
Change some things last minute for my spring class. Because we're going to do group projects.
Yeah.
And
God love you.
I think it'll go okay. I just have to make a couple small little things.
And I will say, I don't necessarily give them the grade that averages out, because sometimes I feel like they've done better work than they've given themselves credit for. But then other times I feel like they haven't done the quality of work that they think they've done. But I mean, that's part of the feedback is, you left this out, or this wasn't fully developed. But I don't feel like but I still keep if this person gets the highest percentage of the points to begin with, or not the percentage of the points, but if this person averages out to 18 out of 20, they're still going to be the one who gets the most, even if I have to pull it down to reflect that, well, they didn't necessarily do everything. I still keep that same structure. It just may not be that it's the strict average of what they've submitted, but that's my basis for it. And they're surprisingly consistent. I thought it would be a little different, but I found over the years that they are surprisingly consistent. I shouldn't say surprisingly anymore, but they're remarkably consistent in being, straightforward about who does the work and what quality of the work they do.
And I just use numbers. Can't be. This is the data that I get, and you can get even more, dig down even deeper than this. But this is what I use. So this includes their self-rating, and this is without their self-rating, and you can sometimes see differences that may be worth noting. And it looks like the lowest you can actually get is like being rated ones. You can't be rated zeros on anything. So these two, per their comments, are that the other two never did anything. So they just got zeros. But you get that opportunity for confidential communication with me. I did a lot of coaching when I was doing group work, a lot of online coaching of the teams to help them work out their differences or talk about appropriate teamwork. But then I would use this. If they're in the 90s to 1s to 105 is the highest you can be, they get the full team score. So that's, and then you can, like you saw, you can hover over their names if they've been highlighted and they have left a note for me. So, created by engineers.
That's why I can't figure it out.
No, it's not that hard.
You're married to an engineer.
It does. He never helped me. He never helped me with this.
You have a question?
I was going to answer your question. I think
please do.
My biggest challenge with online classes, I don't teach an online class, but I develop course lecture materials to help students with their studies, is the continued expansion of the notes and the modules.
Oh, yeah.
Are we able to go outside of the D2L format for an online class to, say, find references and information from external website domains that have professionally organized information? And are we able to create online classes with domains that are outside of the D2L, such as Google Sharing or Google Documents? Or is it pretty much an internal system at this point?
I think that's a Myra and Anthony question.
It may be more of a Myra Anthony question. I think yeah.
Are you talking about the course site, like the shell or the content? I'm hearing you're talking about the course shell, not so much
I'm not an online class teacher, so I'm not familiar with your system. Okay. I'm asking about the system and the methods, the protocol for technology. So, for example, there may be an existing site that has advanced surfacing for automobiles that would be a great way to communicate the information.
Sure.
Without reinventing the wheel. NASA's doing that with their production of parts. You go to a library to get your...
So were you talking about linking out?
You can link out from D2L.
From the D2L site.
Link out from
Yeah.
D2L.
Yeah.
The biggest challenge right now is ensuring accessibility for all of your online students. So making sure whatever you do put in or link out to is has ways for the visually impaired to be able to understand what's on the screen, and for those who have auditory impairments to also be able to hear any audio that might be there. So if there's closed captioning, that's what I meant to say. But yeah.
And is the visual, for the most part, being able to zoom in into content?
It's primarily having some written way that a screen reader can, if you have a description of what's being shown on the screen, stop me if I'm saying something wrong or if I'm not saying enough. But to make sure that there's some kind of written word or description of an image that a screen reader can read to those with visual impairments.
I'll just chime in real quick.
Thank you.
We encourage a variety of content from all different sources. When you start getting into assessing students, making sure you can ensure their identity, housing grades, then it gets a little bit more complicated, and it's better in ETSU approved system like D2L. you can absolutely link out to other sources, grab the stuff that's good, don't reinvent the wheel, and use it for your students.
Yeah.
But you have some assurance inside D2L that those are your actual students and not some random person who's just emailing you because they have a secure login and those kinds of things. So it kind of protects you and the student to know that you're in a protected environment.
And Leslie left, but she's done a lot of work with open educational resources and encouraging faculty to use those. So that's stuff that we could easily link to in our course sites, and go to something like that. You don't want to recreate the wheel. And I use a lot of TED Talks because they're way better. I mean, the students love listening.
Way better than me.
They're better than I am.
That's for sure.
And they're hearing from experts in their fields, and I'm not an expert in everything. Well, my dad would say that I think I am. But they can go listen to a 12-minute TED Talk, and it's way better than what I would have done with content that it's not my, that's not my area. But they love the TED Talks and things like that. So linking out to those, but making sure they have closed captions. And I've noticed that I've been playing some of those in my face-to-face class where I know I don't have any students with hearing impairments, but I've noticed everything is now coming up closed captioned. So that's so far everything that I have done has had closed captioned on it, but I'm a little worried that there's.
And I'll just add, it's great to have a variety of resources, and we have incredible resources that we haven't had in years past. But D2L is the shell or the center point that allows us to comply with federal guidelines and SACS guidelines so that we can ensure the students who are registered for our classes are in fact the students in our class. So if everything runs through D2L, it doesn't matter what kind of sources that you use, but it matters that those students get to that information through a resource that is controlled, so we comply with all the federal laws.
That's why I asked. I figured it would be that way. Thank you.
What else?
So what do you love about online? I mean, we've all got challenges, and we've talked a lot about those kind of challenges.
Flexibility.
What's your flexibility? Yeah.
I also think that my students' learning is a little deeper than it was in face-to-face. You can't hide.
Yeah.
I know who's participating and who's not, and to what degree. And I think they put more thought into what they're posting in discussions than they do if they're just saying it out loud in a class. So I think that the learning is deeper.
They think about it before they do it.
Yeah, if you're having an in-class discussion, you're not necessarily citing everything that you are, with support, everything you're saying, but in my discussions, they have to.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
And I think that's a benefit to the faculty as well, because I was thinking about the discussion that one of my online class had last week, and because somebody said this, I went out and found 3 different sources that went along with what they were saying. Well, if that wouldn't have happened in a face-to-face class. I might have thought about it afterwards and sent them an email, but probably not, because we would have moved on to whatever was next. But in that online environment, I'm like, oh, I'll go look at that right now while I'm on this discussion board, and then posted those, and a number of the students said, oh, I'm so glad you posted that. I had no idea. So, but it's not something I would have thought to put in there to begin with. It was only because of that discussion board that the student kind of went down a rabbit hole, but not too bad. But it was like, yeah, that does make sense. That's, if that's what you've encountered on the job, and it might not be what everybody else does, but here's something to consider. So I think it does give you not just that flexibility, but the ability to be, to chase those rabbit holes a little bit if you need to. Nobody else loves online. Karen's the only one in Virginia.
I'm kind of curious. You've mentioned a lot of different things pulling it all together, what does an average week look like for you teaching online? And I bet there's some similarities and some differences, but imagine you're a third into
There is no average.
No, there's not.
What does that look like, especially for people who may be entering into this soon? What's an average week look like?
Lots of discussions.
Yeah.
I have on my calendar every day the course number and DB. And I'm a list person, so discussion board. Anthony's question was, what does an average week look like for online?
Teaching, yeah.
Teaching, yeah,
Is it
teaching.
mainly on your phone? Do you set aside time?
Oh, no,
3
computer.
times a week? What is?
Every day, every day.
When it fits.
No set time, but pretty much every day. Sometimes
Yes.
it's 10:30, 11 o'clock at night is the first chance to sit down and do discussions or grade. Don't like grading that late at
I've
night,
never
but-
been very good at scheduling, so I might look at it at 6 o'clock this morning, and I may not look at it until 10 o'clock tomorrow, or it may be that I look at it 10 times during that time
Right,
frame.
yes.
Part of it depends on where I know we are in the class, and because of experience, I may know that this one always gets people. And so it's kind of that heads up that I need to be just a little bit more tuned in, or it's that I just think about it, but it is, I do the phone thing too. I am a terrible thumb typer, but I see that little light blinking on my phone, and it's like I can't stand it. I have to go look and see what it is that's out there. And if it's a student question and I can, sluggishly type something out on the phone, okay. Or it might be that I go grab the computer and I really give them an answer. Or I say, okay, I got to think on that one a little bit. But it can be all-consuming.
Oh, yeah.
And I think I'm at that stage where I'm trying to talk to myself and go, you've got to quit letting it be all-consuming.
Yeah.
You have to turn it off for a little while, because it's real easy for me to check it way too often or make a comment too often. And I'm trying to get a little bit of my life back. But I think it varies with the time of the semester as to what I'm doing. And at this point in the semester, I'm also looking at spring and going, what is it that I didn't do for that class that I was going to do earlier to get it ready for the next semester? And it may be for the class I'm teaching now to say, I try to make adjustments and improvements to a course as I go along. So if I've never gotten questions about this content or this assignment, and this semester all of a sudden I do, it might be that, boy, I've never had anybody interpret that way, but now that I have, I can make that clearer. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to make that change in next semester's course, and I try to do it then. So with that thought that spring is coming, I'm spending a lot more time going, what do I have to do to get ready for spring? Or what do I need to bump up that course just a little bit more, or those kind of things?
I'm adjusting content in the current course now. I'm adding some things in, some supports. So when I see that when I'm giving a lot of the same feedback to many, many people, I'm like, heck with this, let's find a better way. And so I try to create something and point all their eyes in that direction, and 3 of them will actually go there and read it. But I usually start my week by sending out an email reminding them of what's coming up for the week. Yes, they're graduate students. Yes, they have a schedule and a syllabus. But one thing about online is that it's out of sight. And so it's a way to just touch base with them, remind them that we exist, remind them of what's going on, and make sure they have their plan for the week. And then I'm doing what they said. There's something always to be grading and sending feedback or posting feedback. And then considering course improvements for current course, and you're right, starting to think about next semester.
Yeah, there's no average. I don't think there's an average
really not.
week. I wish there were, because I think that
They're heavier
it's-
grading weeks and lighter
some weeks
grading weeks.
you've got a lot
yeah.
of grading, some weeks, and one of the I'd say it's a mistake only because I think it was a rookie mistake. I didn't look at all of my online courses in the totality the first couple of semesters I was teaching them, and so I ended up with big assignments due all in the same weeks throughout the semester. And that was a real learning experience, because my goal has always been to get all assignments graded within a week, and I could not do it with everything else that I had going on. I mean, if all I had to do was class, I could have done it, but that wasn't an option. And it probably would have made me crazy anyway, because the big assignments just take that much longer, and to do quality feedback and all of that. So after that, I started looking at my schedules together and go, oh, I probably should not have those 2 assignments due in the same week, because somebody's going to get shortchanged if I get in a jam. So I made those adjustments. Right now, my challenge, because I'm teaching 2 face-to-face classes and 2 online classes, I sometimes forget, because I'm going to face-to-face classes, that I have those online classes. I mean, I don't forget totally, but it's the out of sight, out of mind thing that, oh yeah, I just went to that class today, so I'm done. I did my class for today, and then I go, oh my gosh, I've got discussions. There's 30 discussion posts there. I forgot I needed to go read. So I think that average week, it would be nice if there was one, but there really, in my experience, there's not, and you don't know what might hit a group.
Right.
Suddenly there's a lot of discussion that wasn't there, and it may have to do with what's going on in the world, or just where they are, or something happened at work for them, and suddenly there's a lot of stuff to discuss that you really weren't expecting that topic to hit home, and it does, and suddenly it's, all of a sudden it's huge. And sometimes grading takes longer than you expect, and so I rely on sticky notes a lot and reminders on my calendar. Discussion board, so I can check it off. Because if I didn't have that, there are some days when I get to 10:30 at night and go, oh my gosh, I have not even opened D2L today. I've got to do that before I sit down. And then other days, it's the first thing I do when I get to work, and I'm checking it multiple times a day. So. That may not be what you wanted to hear.
No, but I do think that there is no end when it's online.
No.
It will fill in any gaps you give it.
Yeah.
And so I think it's actually very important, and I'm not one to follow this advice very well, but very important to try to set limits actually on your time, because it'll take it.
It will.
Myra, did you get any other questions coming in? What is that feedback over there?
It is, I just can't read it from, eyes aren't that good.
Oh.
They're a little out of context for
What we were just talking about.
So a little bit, one comment was their lives interfere greatly with academic intensity. Yeah, I think if I'm understanding this person correctly, we can all get distracted, and it's not just faculty, it's students too. And that work-life balance, we're all faced with that one. And if anybody comes up with that magic answer, you can be rich. I try to encourage students to set aside some time every day, or at least every other day. To
treat it as if it were a live class with
Yeah.
dedicated time,
And,
because
I can-
otherwise they want it to
I
fit
can
in the.
say that real well. I don't necessarily follow that advice real well, because I don't stick to those schedules very well for myself. but I tend to pop in quite often. And, you know, I think yesterday I didn't have any grades due, and today it's like, where did all these papers come from? And it was that moment where I thought, oh no, did I have I not looked at this in a few days? Why am I suddenly overwhelmed? And then I looked at the calendar and it's like, oh, I'm okay. It's okay. But part of it, I think you were talking about balance earlier, and that balance between giving students a benefit of the doubt that they are balancing and working on things versus holding up the rigors and the standards of the course. And that's really that's a judgment call. And we've all been there and done that.
And I think
what that is.
I think one of the challenges, I know Alison and I have talked about this because we do a comparison of, well, not really comparison, but we go to lunch and complain about our essay class. We read our worst comments. Yes.
Step one.
We read our worst comments on our SAIs.
Complain about them to your best friends.
We complain about them, and then we say, okay, enough complaining. What are we going to do about them? And that has really changed my perspective on the frustrations of teaching online, where you don't see students and they can't hear your tone of voice, and you can't see their eye rolls or they're falling asleep. And we used to go and just complain, and then we finally realized at some point that wasn't really helping. We felt better temporarily, but it didn't fix anything. So then we said, well, what are we going to do with this? And we used each other as sounding board. Well, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And that's made a huge difference in the way I viewed things, because I felt like there were so many things that I couldn't control while I was going through the course, because I couldn't control the student. I mean, I could tell them, here's the due date, but I couldn't control whether or not they actually turn their work in. And one of the frustrations that I've had personally is when I have students who don't, and I think Alison's comment earlier about the start, stop, continue, and don't give us this much work and don't expect this. They have classes that they can do in a weekend. And I don't like to think they're ours, but they're not mine, they're not Alison's, they're not Nancy's, but they're somebody's, and they can do that. And then they get us, and they think, what is wrong with you that I cannot finish this class in a weekend? And I had a student who told me, this was years ago, we were just doing the, what'd you do this weekend thing? And he said, I finished my class. And this was like the second week of the semester. And the other students were going, what do you mean you finished a class? We're only 2 weeks in. And he goes, oh yeah, I just spent the weekend and got through class X. And interestingly enough, the students were the ones, and I kept my mouth shut because I was, but the students said, how did you learn anything? And I was like, yes, there is not. And I thought, okay, thank goodness, at least some of them recognize that is not the way to do something. But he was perfectly fine with the fact that he was finished with an entire class in a weekend, because he said, all I had to do was just take the test and I'm done. If that's the way you're teaching your online class, you're not helping those of us who don't teach that way. So please don't do that. But we had a conversation about that after that student told me that, and it was like, that's why they hate us.
Yeah.
Because we actually expect them to do some work, and we drag it out for oh my gosh, a whole semester. They can't finish the class in the weekend. But to me, that's doing it right. It's giving them time to process information. It gives them time to go look up other information. If they do it in a weekend, they're done. They will not think about that class again, ever. And they really haven't learned anything, because if they were just taking a multiple choice test, they were going through as fast as they could and they're done. So that's one of the things that I think is the challenge for those of us who teach online, is doing it right and knowing that for that instructor, whoever that was, they didn't do anything in that class. They assigned a textbook and they created some tests that they probably won't look at again, and they didn't have discussions, and they didn't really do anything. And wherever that class was, that's not the optimal experience for the student. So even though it is incredibly time consuming, and from one week to the next, it may be you're pulling your hair out, and the next week you may actually be able to breathe a little bit. But if you're doing it right, what the students get out of it, and when they tell you, things like that's the most like a face-to-face class, or I didn't think I would learn anything in online, but I really did. And, oh, this was really great. I didn't know about TED Talks or whatever it is. And I've had a lot of students say, do you know how many hours I spent watching TED Talks after we had to watch that one for class this week? And I'm like, yes, that's great, because whatever you were doing, you were engaged in the learning process. And maybe you weren't watching TED Talks that had anything to do with this class, but maybe you watched one that had something to do with another class, and you found information that you wouldn't have found otherwise. So as frustrating as it may be, and those times when you do want to beat your head on a wall, call us, we'll go to lunch, and we'll complain about it, then we'll say, okay, stop, what can we do about it? How are we going to fix this? So.
You've been talking a lot about the front end work, and then I hear you discussing, what your regular week is like. Can you speak a little bit about the difference that you feel in how you approach a class? If you're teaching Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 8 o'clock in the morning.
I better be on at 8 o'clock on Monday.
Yeah. You do what you're doing. How is that different from the day-to-day things you do in an online course? Do you feel like it's different? Do you feel like your time is spent doing more teaching, guiding, coaching than, how is it different from a regular lecture class?
I haven't taught a regular lecture in so long that I don't feel comfortable answering that.
I'm doing both.
I think that the biggest difference that I could speak to is probably that when I taught on ground, I did a lot of the prep just before class.
Yeah.
And that's just not the way you can do it online. You have to have most of that stuff up and ready to go. But instead, I'm being more responsive to the in-the-moment issues.
So your time is spent differently.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think so.
Yeah.
It's
I
a lot
like
of
having-
Distinction that gets lost.
I like having
It's
the
hard to
online class set
articulate
up.
it.
I've thought about the discussion questions. I have sticky notes that as somebody makes a suggestion or in the start, stop, continue, I'd like more on this topic or whatever. And I do a sticky note and I stick it in a folder, and then at the end of the semester, I go back and look through all of those and say, okay, when I get, whenever I teach this class again, these are things I'm going to do, and when that one really, don't need to do that. And so I just move sticky notes around. But I like having things set up on the front end, because I know I don't want to say the bulk of the work, but the work that makes the everything that makes it run is done, but it's the maintenance
And the
after
teaching.
that. And
The
the
teaching
teaching can then
is still
happen.
there,
Yeah,
right?
and the face-to-face, sometimes I feel like I taught today, and I've taught face-to-face today, and I walked in and I thought, I've got to have some way to end this class other than the way it was going to end. And I thought, okay, what am I going to do? So while they were doing some in-class activities, I was looking through TED Talks to find something that would sort of tie in what I was doing that day. That's something I can do in face-to-face, but I also don't feel like I'd put that much thought into it on the front end. That here it was today that I was thinking about it while I was sitting in class and going, oh gosh, I've got to do something. Well, in online, I've already thought about that. Mm-hmm. I've already thought about the flow and the structure, and I can add something like that, but it didn't make or break the class because the class was already there, the course was already there. But in a face-to-face class, if things aren't going well, I got to do something now.
So you do think there's a difference between preparing your materials for a class and teaching?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I think good teaching, even online, a lot of it is the environment and the activities you set up in advance. I think that is also a teaching skill.
Yeah.
But then there's your presence and your responsiveness to what comes up as they're learning that is also part of the teaching process.
It's just
Yes.
different. It's the
I think that setting up the class all the way through the course beforehand it's a challenge, and it's actually a challenge that I enjoy.
yeah.
I think it gives you a nice opportunity to set yourself up for success in that you can connect all of those accreditation dots, and do you have all this content that you need to have for your discipline in there, and you can build on this knowledge, and you can do all of those good things, and you can see it when you do it before the semester ever starts, and sometimes that's easier online because whether you do some of that last second planning for a course, then you can make sure all of those things are done. Check mark, check mark, check mark. And then I like to spend my time during the semester as in what's going on now, and what are those teachable moments, and how are they viewing it, and how can I react to that and cycle back around, and knowing what that entire course content is perhaps gives me more opportunities to connect some of those dots. So,
I agree with that.
And I think, there's been some stuff going on in my personal life this semester that wound up being very applicable to some of the topics. And it was easy to throw that in almost as a case study kind of thing. But because it was something that's happening in the world of nursing right now, and it's not that it's unique to me, it's what's happening in the world of nursing. But it was that personal connection that you can throw in, and you do that face to face all the time.
Yeah.
But in an online, you've got that standard there, and then you can add to it. That is more of what happens during the middle of the semester.
That's the fun part. I hate that the online takes up so much time, but I love it too.
Yeah.
I love the engagement with my students. And like Susan said, I have gotten requests to be on their exit committees that say, I know we were an online class, but I feel like you know me better than some of my on-ground instructors. So.
Yeah.
And I do know them, but I do. I just get to know them.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes I feel like I know my online students better than my face-to-face students. The ones who sit there and never say a word. In online, you can't if you do not say a word, then
you're failing.
You're probably going to fail. But in online, everybody has a voice. In face-to-face, some people never talk, and they can get by with that. But in online, if you're doing it right, there should be nobody who's silent.
Yeah.
You look like you were going to say
I
something.
was just going to parrot that's the new way of communication, and they're much more comfortable.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think we do get more people opening up that way. I have better, this is weird because I hybridized the class I'm teaching right now. When I see them on ground, that relationship's a little more awkward than a very easy online communication that I have with some of them. It's very unusual. I've been noting that this semester. Any last thoughts? We're getting close to the end.
It's the hardest job you'll ever love.
The hardest job you'll ever love. I love it. That's it.
Well, thank you all very much for your time this
You're welcome.
afternoon. I thought it was fascinating. I loved hearing your expertise and your experience, and thank you very much.